Jake had always been terrified of what lay beneath his bed. Each night he'd pull the covers up to his chin, eyes wide in fear, convinced that something monstrous was hiding in the dark void. Despite his parents' reassurances, the fear gnawed at him relentlessly. They'd grown accustomed to his nightly cries, sometimes letting him sleep on the couch to avoid waking up in the dead of night. One night, however, everything changed. After another routine bedtime of tucking Jake in and wishing him good night, his parents left, hoping this night would be different. The house settled into an eerie silence, broken only by the soft whisper of wind against the windows. Jake, determined to be brave, tried to ignore every creak and groan of the old house, but then he heard something, a faint whisper that seemed to seep through the walls and into his ears. Jake. The voice was almost imperceptible, but it was there, sending chills down his spine. Jake buried his head under the covers, praying it was just his imagination. But the whisper came again, closer this time. Jake? Fear constricted his chest as the whispering grew more insistent, punctuated by an unsettling, high-pitched giggle. Jake. It was right next to him now. Jake's heart raced, and his breath came in quick, shallow gasps. He heard the voice again, but this time it was distorted, elongated, and sinister. Jake! Unable to bear it any longer, Jake called out, his voice barely above a whisper. Mom? Dad? There's something in my room. But his parents were sound asleep, miles away from the terror unfolding in Jake's bedroom. The whispering grew louder, more frenzied. Jake, 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 Jake. The chant was relentless, growing more chaotic. Jake's panic reached a fever pitch. He wanted to flee, but his limbs felt paralyzed. The door to his room began to thump rhythmically. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was deliberate, persistent, and menacing. Jake stared at the door, his breath catching in his throat. The knocking grew louder and more violent, transforming into frenzied banging. Bang, bang, bang! The noise shook the door frame, accompanied by a cacophony of guttural, inhuman screams that seemed to reverberate through the very walls of the house. Jake's fear turned to desperation. He scrambled out of bed and dove under it, trying to stifle his sobs. From his hiding place, Jake heard the relentless banging morph into a frenzy of tearing and rending noises. The room seemed to close in around him, the darkness pressing down like a living entity. Then, abruptly, the banging ceased. The sudden silence was deafening. Jake hesitated, peeking out from his refuge. The sight that greeted him was beyond comprehension. The bedroom door was ajar, and the fog of darkness seemed to billow through it. Jake's gaze fell upon a grotesque pair of feet standing by his bed, dirty, bloodied, and covered in festering sores. The feet moved slowly, dragging along the floor as if they were scraping against something unseen. Panic surged through Jake, and he turned to see what was beside him. His blood ran cold as he saw his mother lying on his bed. Her body convulsed uncontrollably, and insects crawled from her gaping mouth and vacant eyes. Her face was a mask of torment, a sickening tableau of agony that made Jake's stomach churn. Desperate to escape, Jake tried to flee, but a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. It was a gaunt woman in a tattered green dress, her long hair hanging in tangled knots around her face. Her mouth was a gaping maw, devoid of a jaw, with her tongue lolling grotesquely. The woman's eyes were hollow, devoid of humanity. She grabbed Jake with terrifying strength, her grip like iron. She slammed him onto the floor, pinning him down with an inhuman force. The room was filled with a maddening, high-pitched buzz of bees, their stings like needles in his throat and mouth. Jake's screams were muffled as he choked on the excruciating pain. His body swelled grotesquely, expanding beyond its limits as the bees continued their relentless assault. In his final moments, Jake's vision blurred and darkened. His stomach, now grotesquely distended, finally burst with a sickening, splattering sound. The woman's face loomed above him, her hollow eyes filled with a malevolent satisfaction. As the world spun into darkness, the voice echoed one last time, a chilling whisper that seemed to come from the very depths of the void. Jake. Forever. The house fell silent once more, the fog outside swirling as if it had swallowed another soul. The night reclaimed its quiet, leaving behind the remnants of a young boy's nightmare.